The Democratic presidential field is narrowing following last night's New Hampshire primary. Businessman Andrew Yang, Senator Michael Bennet, and former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick have all suspended their campaigns. Senator Bernie Sanders won last night's primary, but Pete Buttigieg is holding on to his delegate lead.
It was also a good night for Senator Amy Klobuchar, who surged ahead to finish in third place, beating out both Senator Elizabeth Warren and former Vice President Joe Biden. The
race for the nomination now turns to Nevada and South Carolina on the two final Saturdays this month, and of course Super Tuesday in the beginning of March.
Former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who was not in New Hampshire on the ballot there, is also looking ahead to Super Tuesday. He was on the trail in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where early voting is underway, and he told a fired-up crowd today that he's running to defeat President Trump. And recent polls suggest voters believe the New York City billionaire can take on that fight.
In a Quinnipiac poll among all registered voters, Bloomberg has a bigger lead over President Trump than the other top Democratic contenders. And joining us now is former Miami Beach Mayor Philip Levine. He is a surrogate for the Michael Bloomberg campaign, and nice to see you.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're glad you're not on Miami Beach. Our lead story was a big controversy.
I know. But listen, the mayor's doing a great job there.
Good to see you, Philip. Let's talk about Michael Bloomberg. What about the criticism that he's just a rich guy who is writing checks and wants to buy this nomination? How do you
I think it's unfair, Elliot, because listen, Mike Bloomberg started from nothing and he built his companies himself. Unlike the president that we have today, who, of course, started on third and thinks he hit a triple. But Mike Bloomberg is actually taking his money and putting it where his mouth is. He's going to change the country for a positive way. He's out there saying, we need to get rid of Donald Trump. I'll put my money forward, and not just money, my effort. And when people say, well, we can't donate, why can't we donate? He won't accept donations, but what he will accept is for people to go out and donate to other Democrats running for office or the DNC. So I think it's unfair. I think he is working very, very hard, and I believe he's the guy that can beat Donald Trump, and that to me is probably the most progressive thing you could do right now.
So he's basically ignoring these first contests. Why?
Well, it's because he started late. He started late and he realized something else, that these four states are very important, but they only account for less than 4% of the total delegates for the Democratic primary. The big states, like the one we live in, Florida, and some of the other ones like Ohio and all the other states out there, are states that the Democrats have to invest in. He's putting hundreds of millions of dollars in the big states that are most important for Super Tuesday and, of course, our primary on March 17th, where the other Democrats that are running don't have the funding, don't have the resources, aren't putting money into these big states, and Mike's doing it. And that's how you win the presidency.
What is it about Michael Bloomberg that attracted you to his campaign?
Well, I love the fact that Mike actually became an incredibly successful mayor. And I can tell you as a former mayor, Mike's the mayor of mayors. He was one of the greatest mayors in American history. And all the mayors look up to him. Look at the endorsements coming out right now from mayors across the country. It's like a mayor's military that's starting right now. We have mayorsformike.com. And you have the former mayor of Philadelphia, Mike Nutter, African-American. The mayor of Washington, D.C., Bowser, African-American, coming out all over. He gets things done, Elliot. He doesn't talk. He actually gets it done. And most importantly, we need to beat Donald Trump. And we're not going to beat him with those other candidates. People are realizing it. If you'd like to have an experiment and play around and actually lose the election, kind of like what happened before, then go with a revolutionary if you want, okay? Because we know something about revolutionaries in Florida. They're not very well liked down here. So Mike Bloomberg is the guy that can beat Donald Trump, and it's catching on like wildfire.
Okay, so let's talk about stop and frisk. It was obviously a highly controversial policing program in New York City while he was mayor. We're going to play a portion of audio of a recording that Bloomberg talking about using the policy in minority communities, and then what he had to say today. Take a listen.
That's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them.
It was 5 years ago, and it's just not the way that I think, and it doesn't reflect what I do every day.
Some would argue is not that long ago, 5 years ago. How does he convince liberal and black voters that that's not who he is today?
Well, I think most importantly, what Mayor Bloomberg has said is, I'm sorry. It was the wrong policy. He said something that a lot of elected leaders don't ever say, including our president. I made a mistake. Now, I got a lot of things right when I was mayor. I didn't get that right. And so I apologize for it. And I think, wouldn't we like to have more elected leaders today come out and say, I'm sorry when they do something wrong? I'd love to see our president do that. Mike Bloomberg's a guy that learns from his lessons. And that's what he's saying. And as far as African-American support, the numbers that just came out shows that he's now #2 in African-American support across the country among all Democratic candidates. And we see it with African-Americans coming on board.
What about the argument that if you bring a centrist Democrat, put up a centrist Democrat, which I assume Michael Bloomberg is a centrist Democrat, against Donald Trump, it's not going to bring out the voters, the voters who are not reliable voters, young people and people who really want change, as somebody like Bernie Sanders would?
I think Bernie Sanders, when we look at Bernie has a very specific following. If you want to win the presidency, you have to win Florida. If you don't want to win the presidency, you don't need to win Florida. Bernie Sanders can't win Florida. Bernie Sanders can't cross over. And I say it, I'll say it again. Bernie Sanders can promise free everything he wants. Free Starbucks, free Apple. I don't care what he promises. He has supported Sandinista regimes. He has had his honeymoon in the Soviet Union. People in Florida don't love revolutionaries. They don't like revolutions. Matter of fact, they left revolutions to come to Miami. He won't win Florida. He won't win the presidency. And I have to tell you something. I always say it. Progressives can win districts. Centrists win states. He will not win Florida. He will lose this election if, God forbid, he becomes the nominee.
So we've all seen his ads. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars already on these ads. How much money is he actually willing to spend?
Unlimited amount. And think about that. We have a president right now who has hundreds of millions of dollars and be able to put towards the campaign. And we have other Democratic nominees that are raising very small amounts. Mike Bloomberg is saying, I'll do whatever it takes. It's my money. I started from nothing. I'll put whatever it takes to beat Donald Trump. I got to tell you, based on what he's done, based on what he wants to do, this is the right guy for the job.
All right. Well, next time he's in Florida, can you bring him in?
Absolutely. I'll do everything in my power.
All right. Philip Levine, the former mayor of Miami Beach, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.